Okay, so we'll try to start more or less on time today. Welcome back, everybody. We hope that you had a good day yesterday and a good gathering in the evening. Thank you for being back for this second day of forum. So the agenda of today is composed by a first session about business plans and financing. We'll then split again in breakout rooms, with one breakout room about infrastructure and grids and the other one about energy efficiency interventions on the islands. And after the lunch, we will wrap up with reporting from the different, from the 4 breakout rooms, the 2 of today and the 2 of yesterday, and then we'll also finally go for the last site visits. So let me introduce a bit the session about business plans and financing. So we of course know that funding is very important for many of the islands and many of the interventions, but we also know that in order to scale up the energy transition, we really need to make our clean energy projects profitable for the developers and especially for the communities. So this will be discussed with a high-level roundtable with developers and lenders that operate in Europe and especially on European islands. So I would now give the floor to Amandine and to George that probably will introduce the panel. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So during the next hour, we'll go a little bit around how to finance your project. And we are very welcome to have here today very good developers that can show you how they have found the money for their project. And also, as we said, a bank that can lend money for you and to explain what are the constraints and what are the opportunity you can. So let me welcome Jean-Gabriel first from Corsica Soleil. You can go see. And then we have a local, Anton from Azores. And then a really important part of financing are the banks. So we are very welcome to have Mr. Tiago from BPI, a Portuguese company. And yeah, the panel will be moderated by our dear friend, George. Thank you, George. It's working? Yeah. So before going into the panel, we just wanted to remind you a little bit about one tool that we have under the secretariat. It's called the Marketplace. So I will briefly present you this tool. We have done a workshop online, so you can find a lot of information on the webpage. Then we will have the panel, and the idea is to let you a lot of time to ask many questions to this very knowledgeable person that might help you to open your minds and find new way of financing your projects. So we just wanted to do a small recap on the marketplace. We have been doing some work on this. We have done a workshop. It was in February, I think, George? Yeah. And it's a tool that we have developed under the secretariat to enhance the matchmaking between island community and investor. We know that it's not very easy for island community to look for what kind of investor, if it's a bank, if it's any kind of other investor. So we are here to help. That's the idea. So if you have a project that you want to finance, there is a tool on the webpage to really support you and from us, the Secretariat, to help you in finding a good financing and to help you structure this financing. So why do you need this? Because you need to finance your project, and we can connect you, we can support you in having a connection with investors that are more willing to invest in clean energy projects or let's say also smaller project, because you are a small island usually, so it's highly important. And also from the investor side, they can have the opportunity to increase their pipeline of potential investments. So the idea is really to support you, and we are here to really to support you on this. So we developed several tools. Everything is on the webpage. If someone wants to have more detail on this, you can ask someone from the secretariat. You can grab me, and I can show you quickly on the internet. So we developed some tool to support you to develop a business case, and then to have the sufficient information to make a project with an investor. So first, we've noticed that some islanders, because they are not specialists, they do not know what are the steps to develop the documentation and the information to after be able to talk to an investor. So this is the first guidelines that we developed. It's called Step to Finance Sustainable Energy Project. And it gives a little bit information on what kind of parameter, what kind of information an investor, meaning a commercial bank or any other investor, would like to have in hand to be able to assess the project, if they will finance it and under which condition. Then we have an intake form, which is a survey. It's because we noticed also it's not so easy to define all this information and these parameters, financing parameters, especially to have this. So we are here to help the secretariat, and so there is an intake form to fulfill some information, to have some information from the for the secretariat to then be able to support you in the best way to define your project to be bankable, let's say, or financeable. And then we have developed an investor list, which is a kind of a list of some commercial bank and other type of investor where you can see, and maybe you can have some ideas where to look for financing. And now we will, if there are any question on the marketplace? It's all clear? Okay, thank you. So we will start with Jean-Gabriel Steinmetz, Director of Market Access and Sale of Corsica Sole. He will start this panel with a short presentation, an explanation of how they finance their project.
Thank you, Amandine. Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. It's our first CE4EU Island Forum for Corsica Sole. And it's an opportunity for us to present our experience in financing our projects. First, I will briefly try to be quick, tell you who we are. So Corsica Sole is a French company. As the name suggests, it started in Corsica 15 years ago. And we started with a PV on rooftop, especially for farmers. And in 2015, we built a first ground-mounted PV plant in Ajaccio, in Corsica. This plant was actually a hybrid power plant. It was PV plus storage, and so that was 10 years ago. And that enabled us to move on and to install more capacity in Corsica, and then to go abroad, let's say, that is on France mainland, in Belgium. We operate a battery in Belgium. We operate a battery in La Réunion Island also. And we are currently building 400 megawatt hour of batteries in Estonia, which is our more remote location after Réunion Island. So let's jump in the financing aspect. So I'm here today to give you some insights of what we do. So far we've raised close to €500 million with our projects. 200 million in bank debt and the rest in equity to finance the project and to finance the corporate also. We are a growing company. This has been made possible, first of all, by a very optimized capital structure. You have to structure your company so that investors can understand where they put the money into. So that's important that your projects are structured within SPVs, for example, which gives transparency and understandability, I don't know if it's the right word, for the investors. They know, okay, I will put my money in this group of PV plants grouped within an SPV, and this money will be used for the project, not for the corporate, it's for the projects, so I can understand the revenues, the risk, and everything that has to do with the project itself. Then the process, it's quite simple, and we almost know it because we do it at home. When we buy a house, you have to provide some equity and then to find the rest. So to find a bank, to find investors, and the amount of equity that you have to put and the amount of debt obviously depends on the project. And the bank will tell you, it will tell you, according to this project, I want you to put that amount of equity, and the rest, it's okay for me. You will probably talk about it afterwards. How to complement your equity? Then you have to look for banks and funds. What we do is, first of all, we try to work with local, regional banks, because they know the place, they know the regulations, they know the law, they know everything about the energy policies. So if they are already familiar with your project, it's a very good start. If they are not, and that was the case for us 10 years ago in Corsica, it was the first storage in Corsica and the first big storage for France. So we had to go to Germany. Germany was already familiar with storage. So we attracted a German bank, ZARLB, and they financed our project because they knew what we were talking about and they were not afraid. You can also go to see investment funds when banks cannot meet your expectations, are afraid. Or, for example, you might want to work with EBRD if you go to countries that are in situations of where there are too much risks, too many risks that the banks don't want to take. Or you can address investment funds that are really targeting energy transition, because they want you, they need you, in fact, because they need to have projects to put in the investment fund. And this is how we drew Mirova, an Natixis energy transition fund. They came to us, they financed first our projects, and then they also financed at corporate level. They decided to put money in Corsica Sol at corporate level to help us grow and develop. So it's a very good, now it's our shareholder and a good partner, so investment funds are very interesting. When we go to ask for a loan and investments, what we do is that we come with a very well-marketed project. It's important that when you arrive, you show that you are a trusted professional, that you know what you're talking about, that you have a good team behind you, you have a good financing team, a good project team, operation team, maintenance team. Everyone does the job, so you can be trusted. And you have to provide all the documentation. You put the file on the table of the banker, he has to understand everything, and no gray zone. Everything has to be clear. And when there is a risk, you have to describe the risk and say, I know there is a risk, this amount of uncertainty, but don't worry, I have this, and that put in place so that everything goes well in the end. And of course, remember that a bank or an investor doesn't see you only. There are a lot of people requesting money, so you have to bring the best project and tell him, this is the project you have to invest in. Because then he has to go to the investment committee within the bank or within the investment fund, and he will pass after another guy that proposed a project. So yours has to be the best, the clearer and the more trustable project. of course, you need a viable project at first. And on that matter, in terms of business plan, what is important is to show that there are two things that are very important for investors. It's the revenue, how you guarantee the revenue, how you estimate and you secure revenues, and then can you do the project, and is it something that will work? So it's about technology and operations. On the revenue side, of course, the best is to have a long-term contracted revenue. This is what we can get in France with with contracts with the state or the DSO, the TSO. So this is very bankable, unless you work in a country that change regulations without warning. That happened in Spain a few years ago, and that was a nightmare for investors. So you have to find some contract with a trustable counterpart. And but you can also have merchant revenue. It's possible, and we've done it. There is a consequence if you have merchant projects, then the bank will evaluate the probability that it realizes, and there will be an impact on the ratio equity versus debt. So for example, with storage, which are mostly merchant in what we do, we have what we call DSCR. That's the debt service coverage ratio, which is higher. The project has to provide much more revenue than the debt, and so that's the equity that covers the rest. 1 minute. Okay, so I will finish in 1 minute, no problem. In terms of technology, just a few things. Bring a project that is so you have to prove that you can do it, and it's best if you already have done it. So find ways to demonstrate that you have achieved and you have good results, and bring good partners, good EPC contractors with a turnkey contract, warranties, penalties, everything that can cover the risks. And last thing, it is become a corporate social responsibility becomes a thing. I mean, investment funds, they ask you about what you do in terms of CSR, and they want projects that are very good in that aspect. So think about it, it's important in the documentation. That's it for me.
Thank you. And thank you for keeping the time. Now I'll give the floor to Anton. And also thank you for the good advices that you provided now. Anton.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Anton, and I have been the founder of a development project for photovoltaic and battery energy storage systems, renewable energy project here in the Azores. I first came here in the company is Força S.A. In a project we call Azores PVE BESS, or Azores PV and BESS. I'm simply curious, by show of hands, how many people here are actually from islands? More than half. And also by show of hands, how many people believe that all islands are the same? Exactly. But the funny thing is that we're actually facing legal and regulatory headwinds from Brussels that are encouraging us to treat energy projects on islanded systems as if they are the same. And we've had some discussions about that. Yesterday, Paulo André at Berta Cabral who's in charge of energy here in the Azores, Joanna Rita, they have spoken to this topic very carefully. And it's possible that during the Q&A we could speak to this a little bit further. I came here during the pandemic in July 2020 and quickly learned from an Italian engineer here who wanted to do a little renewable energy project, about a megawatt on some land he owned on this island, that 2/3 of the electricity that's generated here in the Azores is generated by burning fuel oil and diesel. 2/3. And that seemed like a lot of fossil fuels. And so we started having discussions in earnest about his project and whether it was possible for him to sell electricity to the local utility, which is ETA. And I started asking the question, well, how much renewable energy could we introduce into the system? Like, what is possible? What would be optimal? And my ambitions were a little too much for this gentleman. And and he said, I just want to do my little project. I'm not interested in some ambitious thing like what you're discussing. And so I called an old colleague who was in Montreal, someone I'd worked with for 15 years, Rick. And I said, Rick, you know, we're talking about this thing, but it seems kind of interesting. Are you interested? And he said, yes. So we began doing some research. We weren't sure what kinds of renewables we could introduce. So we spent a year actually reviewing all of the numbers. ETA does a marvelous job of publishing all kinds of statistics about their energy generation in publicly available on their website every year, all the statistics, everything. And we analyzed and analyzed and analyzed, and we analyzed wind, and we read all kinds of white papers that have been written about increasing the share of renewables on the Azores. So for example, we considered wind, introducing more wind. The problem with wind here is that it's very asymmetrical. It doesn't always blow. We get much more wind in winter when actually our demand loads are lower seasonally. We get less wind in summer when the demand loads are higher. And it blows at night when we have a very low demand load. We don't use much electricity at night. So we ruled out wind or some combination of wind and some other sources of electricity. And we started focusing on solar power. But the problem with solar power here is that it's intermittent. The good news is that the sun shines during the day when our demand load is at its peak. It also shines on weekends and holidays when the demand load is lower. But you've seen what it's like here. In 5 minutes, the weather can change. Clouds pass overhead very rapidly. And if a cloud passes overhead over your solar farm, the power drops. And we also saw some small developers introducing solar projects into the grid without any battery energy storage. But it almost seemed like they were taking little shots at some energy development opportunities without considering the big picture, without considering what was maximally and optimally possible. And we did. So we realized that we would have to introduce a fair amount of battery energy storage at each of our sites in order to manage the fluctuations caused by passing clouds, manage, anyway, give the energy operator at a time to ramp up the oil-fired turbines that it needs to operate the grid in the event that our power goes down, and things of this nature. We did a whole bunch of research, and we arrived at these conclusions. We decided to focus on 6 of the 9 islands. Who has the thing? Could you please flick to the next slide? So we have a project that will produce approximately a little bit more than 75 megawatts peak in DC, so roughly 60 or less megawatts AC injected into the grid, produce about 80 gigawatt hours of electricity annually, which is almost 10% of the total annual production of energy in the Azores on 6 of the 9 islands. And we're also introducing roughly 60 plus megawatt hours of BESS. BESS is at each of our sites, so roughly 10% of production annually total, and we'll reduce roughly 15% of our reliance on fossil fuels in the process if we succeed. There's no guarantee. We're a private developer. We actually have been doing this voluntarily as adventurers on a good faith basis for more than 4 years now. And things have been going pretty well. We're going to talk about financing this project. So the next year, Rick and I spent following this research and determining exactly what we would focus on. We made sure that we would set up some form of, you know what, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the islands. You can see it here, but the 6 islands we chose are the 6 largest islands in the Azores. The next largest is Santa Maria, but Santa Maria is already, I mean, Santa Maria Graciosa. Graciosa is already spoken for, as we saw a couple of times in Paulo Andre's case study in his presentation, from a company that is a private developer called Graciolica. And Graciosa has a very high share of renewables production. And then they're the two smallest islands in the Western group, and logistically and with respect to scale, and they have a very high share of renewables planned for the future. We decided not to pursue them. So in São Miguel, this island, we have 2 sites planned, and they're roughly 25 megawatts combined in total with a lot of BESS. And also we're on Santa Maria, Terceira, Pico, Fayal, and São Jorge. On the islands, on those other 5 islands, the amount of electricity we plan to introduce is actually a pretty big share of the total. Okay, next slide, please, senor. 3 minutes. So, we, being North Americans and having some serial experiences, startup entrepreneurs in my background, primarily infrastructure projects for the internet, the data center, fiber optic networks, things of this nature. We set up a capital structure, and this is so critical that we could attract equity capital with. And you have a diagram of our capital structure. We have a parent company, Força Açoreana, SEA, which is a limited stock company, a joint stock company. And it's the type of company that has shares and can have a large number of shareholders. For each of our 7 projects on 6 islands, we have a wholly owned subsidiary op company, or what the industry would call a special purpose vehicle. We, very rapidly, we knocked on a lot of doors, used our network to try to raise the equity capital that we would require for this almost 100 million euro capital intensive project. And we found, after many, many failures, like just terrible experiences, we found the perfect fit. We found a capital partner outside of Boston who was super high quality, and he just sold his renewable energy fund. He's financed over $6 billion US worth of projects. He had a bunch of money in his pocket. He's financed over 600 photovoltaic projects, and he got involved. And with the limited time I have left, I just want to say, we took a model that's generally used for financing projects when they are ready to build, when everything is fully entitled, when all the plans, permits, PPAs, everything are in place, and we took it to the earliest stage of a development and financed this project with cash equity from a very high quality capital partner in milestones. So it's not like he gave us a bunch of cash up front, but he said, we defined through a share purchase agreement, an SPA. At a certain share price, we achieve certain things by a certain time, and that's tranche A. Then we achieve more things by a certain defined time, that's tranche B. If we don't achieve tranche B, I understand the limitation, then we're still stuck with tranche A prices, and the financer may or may not elect to proceed with another round of financing. We've been with this capital partner for 2.5 years. Things are going pretty well. We're almost fully entitled, and hopefully we can get into a little bit more with respect to the Q&A. Couple of quick benefits. People. We have great people, and each one of our people is an option holder in equity in the venture. And as a North American entrepreneurs, we think that giving everyone a little piece of letting them earn a little piece of the equity has been a great benefit and is a powerful incentive. We could elaborate further, and I'm more than happy to discuss this offline. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Anton, and thank you for keeping the time, and sorry for the pressure. Now I will give the floor to Tiago from the bank point of view, and so a different view, but I'm sure that it will be aligned.
Okay, good morning to everyone. I'll try to be brief to give more room for questions and answers and to comment on the presentations made. So I come from BPI. Maybe it's best I present you what BPI is. Basically, it's a universal bank, universal in the sense that we serve all segments of clients. So it's a commercial bank. BPI is owned by CaixaBank, which is a very large Spanish bank. CaixaBank has assets of over 600 billion euros, so it's fairly large. If we compare this to the banking system in Portugal, it's probably more than all of the banks together. And BPI has a bit more than 40 billion euros in assets. So it's large in Portuguese terms. So we have three main segments: the retail, the private banking, and the corporates. And I won't spend much more time in this, just to show you that there are solutions for renewable energy investments and energy efficiency investments, both in retail with over-the-counter products that form part of the portfolio of the bank. That's more for households and small businesses. And then my department, in which I am the head, structured finance, we deal with corporates, and we do or look at various sorts of transactions or financings, medium long-term corporate bonds and loans, limited recourse project finance or non-recourse project finance. And this is where typically the renewable energy, utility scale renewable energy projects fit in. Then acquisition finance, leverage finance, and much more asset finance, for instance, I forgot to include. But basically, any financing that is a bit more complex typically ends up in my department. So that's just to explain. And I've been doing project finance since the 90s, so I have some experience in project finance. And this is the final slide, in which I try to highlight in utility scale renewable energy project finance in islands in particular, what are the typical or the main concerns for commercial banks. And I emphasize the non-recourse aspect of the project finance. In project finance, what we do is lend typically to an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, and we rely on the cash flows that stem from the project, that are generated by the project. So we do not have or have very limited recourse to the shareholders, to the sponsors of the project. So we need to study the project very well and be confident that it will work. First of all, it will be online, producing, and then it will produce and generate the cash flows that we rely for our money to be paid back. And there is a very important detail. The bank, the commercial bank, does not have upside. We charge an interest, which is fixed. If the project works and goes okay, we get our interest, and that's it. We don't have a premium. The sponsor has a premium, has the upside, also the downside, of course, but we don't have upside. So there are certain risks that the bank, the commercial bank, is not willing to have or to support. Highlighting the main concerns, I think one of the major concerns is the size of the projects. In this case, size matters. Very small projects are not feasible or not bankable for project finance simply because the cost of setting up a project finance is high, and the size of the project needs to be sufficient for us to dilute, or for the sponsor to dilute those setup costs. I'm talking about due diligence, legal advisors, technical advisors, environment, market, insurance, and other advisors. So that's a lot of costs that will be needed. Then the time to get licenses, when you think about a project, and then the time between thinking about a project and then starting to spend the first money in actually building the project can be very long because of the licensing, the projects, the design, etc. So size matters. That's the key. And that is not also, it's not important only for the bank or to have a project finance, but as I hear, it is important also, the size, to attract O&Ms and contractors, because if it's a very small project, it's difficult to be interesting for other suppliers or other stakeholders. One possibility is to aggregate projects, to bundle projects, so that the size is achieved, the critical size is achieved. And we have done so in the past. We have done contracts, a sort of umbrella financing agreement, in which smaller projects that satisfy certain conditions that are very well defined in the contract can be financed. So that speeds up and enables us to finance smaller projects. Another concern is regulatory and policy uncertainty. That's a killer. We need to be confident that there is stability, there is a certainty that there won't be policy changes. One example that scared us very much was the change in regulations in Spain some years ago, in which we had feed-in tariffs and suddenly those were questioned. So that cannot happen, clearly. And also that certainty also shortens the licensing processes. So that's very important. Another thing is the certainty of electricity price or sale price. That is key. And the solution can be feed-in tariffs or equivalent, like contracts for difference or other sort of arrangements. Power purchase agreements is also a solution, provided the off-taker is reliable in terms of credit worthiness. Merchant risk makes it much more difficult. Jean-Gabriel talked about this. Basically, we cannot do pure merchant. We need some part of the sales to be fixed somehow and stabilized in order to have predictability. Another concern is local grid operator that needs to be aligned, because not only he is involved in the licensing of the projects as well, the grid must be adapted to accept or to receive energy produced by renewable projects, because of its intermittency and the damage it can make to the stability of the grid. And integrating utility scale renewable projects may require significant grid upgrades. On the other hand, and it's not written here on purpose, sometimes there is a conflict of interests, because in some islands, or in many islands, the local grid operator is also the TSO, the DSO, and produces energy. So what is the interest in enabling or facilitating the life of independent power producers? I think the incentives are not high, probably, in a context of unlimited financial resources, of course, because if the grid operator has financial resources, the interest in having independent power producers selling electricity to them is so we need to trust there is alignment between the grid operator and the idea of working towards a world in which there is no emissions. And finally, logistics and supply chain constraints. This is true all over, not only in islands, because sometimes it's difficult to take things to the spot, to the site in which the energy, for instance, in wind energy, that's clearly a question. I would say this is true everywhere, but in some islands in particular, it's even more evident. Well, there are many other concerns. I highlighted these ones, and more than happy to discuss these or other matters that you want to. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiago. I'm really glad that everyone took the 10 minutes. So that was my main job here, and it was good. Now, my second main job is to give you the floor. So any questions that you might have to one of the speakers, to all the speakers. I know that it's really hard for the first question, but okay.
I have a question for Anton. My name is Roderick from Ameland. Anton, you mentioned you secured the financing with your own partners mainly. How is it, do you have like a 10-year PPA here locally on the island? And is it indexed against mainland prices or, for example, against fuel oil prices? Could you elaborate a bit on that?
I can elaborate, but in fact, those are good questions and the answers are long. But I'll give you some summaries. In the Azores, we're an autonomous region. We have our own unique regulatory and legal framework. And in fact, when we started pitching people after we'd set up our capital structure, one developer we were pitching, he was developed, I don't know, 500 megawatts of PV projects, mostly in the Ukraine, said, "What is your legal and regulatory framework?" And I realized I didn't know everything about it. And I retained a law firm in Lisbon who had excellent expertise, and we paid them tens of thousands to draft a legal memo about the regulatory and legal framework in the Azores. And it became our business plan, and it is to this day. But the fact is, really we should take your questions mostly offline because it's complicated. Yeah, PPA terms, we've submitted 2 previous iterations for the approval by the national regulator, ERS, who regulates within some limits electricity here in the Azores. We also have a regional regulator. And the first PPA term that we proposed was 35 years. And ERS, the regulator, replied to us, we would consider that to be a potential market foreclosure. So then we came back with a proposed term of 25 years, and they said the same thing. Now we're having our third kick at the can with them, and we're proposing 22.5 years. So we'll see. For example, prices, another matter altogether, but the basic premise is that our prices are based on our costs, open book, plus some reasonable margin. And we'll see if we succeed with that as well. I know you had more, but you know, our time is limited.
Alejandro.
Hi, this is Georgios from Greece. In Greece, we have a lot of discussion about interconnections, which take time, face geopolitical risks, so they are always at risk. We saw that in Kasos recently. How does a potential interconnection to the mainland affect the project financing in a non-interconnected island?
Is that for someone or for everyone, the question?
For everyone, for anyone with an answer.
It's a great question, and probably more relevant to Greece, where the distances and depths aren't so great. For us, the risk is 0, because the mainland is 1,400 kilometers to the east, and these islands are the elevation of the Himalayas. What we're on top of is the tip of the iceberg. It's super deep between these islands, and as Paulo André said yesterday, there are vicious currents between them. We don't have it's not feasible. I mean, you could interconnect anything if you had all the money, but it's not feasible for us to run cabling between these islands. There's 0 risk. In your case, I cannot comment, but in our case.
This is a technical answer. I'm looking more for a financing because you have a very different pricing mechanism in a non-interconnected island. We develop non-intermittent baseload hydrogen-based projects. So we might look in a capacity mechanism, in a per kilowatt hour mechanism, but once you are interconnected, you are considered electrical mainland, and then you are part of a bigger market. So how does the non-visibility of the longevity of the non-interconnected power purchase agreement affect the potential for a connection?
I can give some kind of answer, because actually we are working in Estonia, and Estonia somehow is quite similar to Corsica in terms of electric connection. It's connected to the European frequency area through a kind of weak link in Poland. There are some trading interconnections in DC, so just for trading. And when we invested in the batteries in Estonia to provide services like, on the market, the investors and the banks ask a lot of documentation about what will happen in the future when interconnection are increased, when an interconnection is broke down by some Chinese ship running an anchor in the, you know what I'm talking about. And so the answer is yes, it will be a massive impact on your business case, and you have to find experts that can run simulations and understand how your asset, the value of your asset will change. And it might be an opportunity for your asset, it might be a threat, and you have to demonstrate and calculate, estimate it.
Make a final cut. Sorry for making three-part question, but how do we balance between the need for such solutions locally to convince the central government that they need to take a risk together with us in giving a pricing mechanism that might change in the future? You see, it's a matter of decision-making, also in risk appetite, and governments are famously non-risk appetite as we are as an IPP. Thank you.
Well, you have to be very close to the government ministries to understand. You cannot anytime have an influence, but it's important to understand, and maybe you will understand that, okay, this interconnection might happen, but then you have the planning, you have investments, you have construction works and stuff, and you can understand that, okay, I have 10 years, let's make my BP on 10 years, and that's it.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot. So first of all, thanks a lot for the very nice presentations that you made. They were really informative and interesting. So I have a comment to you, Jean-Gabriel, and then also a follow-up to what Tiago said. So Jean-Gabriel, I was listening to you very attentively, and one of the things you said at the beginning is that you, of course, give priority to working with local and regional banks because they are the ones who know better the situation and who can, voila, put the project in context and thus facilitate the financing. It makes a lot of sense. I just hear from colleagues who have more experience and who are even sometimes in this room that that's nice, but sometimes the local banks, they lack the knowledge, technical knowledge to understand the projects because they are very, leading edge, it's new technologies and so on. So would you like to elaborate a little bit on that? What's your experience with that, and can anything be done about it? Is that the case? And Tiago, thanks a lot. Your presentation was excellent. I don't have a question, but just a follow-up. You mentioned indeed that it's very important for financing to work with local authorities and national authorities to shorten the permitting periods. I think that's a problem very clearly identified at EU level. So the length of permitting in itself is a problem not for financing and for other issues. I just want to mention that the EU has it in mind. We released the Affordability of Energy Action Plan a couple of months ago, which is basically the first set of actions on policy for the next months. And there is a specific action for the shortening of the permitting periods, which I think would address the problem you identified. Thanks.
It's excellent news.
Okay, so about regional banks and maybe the lack of knowledge and expertise. We finance a lot of projects in Corsica with a bank which is CEPAC. It's Caisse d'Épargne Provence Alpes Côte d'Azur. Côte d'Azur is maybe something that rings a bell. So it's a regional bank of southeast of France. When they financed PV project, they knew everything about it, so no problem. Now we have started a hydrogen activity at Corsica Sol. And as soon as we started and we became public and saying we are building a hydrogen plant in Corsica, we got a call from CEPAC saying, okay, I don't know anything about it, and one time you will come and ask me for money. So can you please tell me what you're doing? And can you give me every information so that I understand, and I understand what I have to find out and which experts I need to bring to be able to answer when you come and ask for financing. So that's one answer is anticipation. And another thing, if you are left with no solution because you need to right now finance your project, it's a little bit what happens for us in Estonia. Then you have to go to neighboring banks. And for example, the Nordics are very keen and used to financing stuff in the Baltics. So you go to them, and maybe, I don't know what they do within bankers, but maybe at some point they share knowledge, maybe.
Hi. In other projects that we do, with the company I work for, Econoler, we do technical assistance for banks for credit lines related to energy efficiency and renewable energy. So what we do under this, we train the banks. We are not doing this in Europe. It's mainly Palestine, Ghana, Egypt, Bangladesh, and so on. But it can be done also in Europe. And what we do is we train every level of the bank to understand. And of course, the training is different, and the language is different, and the technicality are different. And we also train the engineers, because some banks have engineers. I mean, in Europe, they should have. And so we train them to understand what is, especially for energy efficiency and renewable energy, we train them to explain what to look at when you receive a project and so on. And if the project is bigger than this, go to an expert outside and so on. So yeah, it can be done also this way.
Can I comment on that as well? My experience was that my experience is that new technologies is always a challenge for banks, always. So I think, on reflection, and I'm getting philosophical as I come of age, we need to be persistent, and I'm on the technical commercial side. I am personally, myself, I'm an engineer, so that helps. And I think there are two types of banks, of commercial banks. Ones which are simple followers. They will not do it until it is completely stabilized in the market, and then they will follow. And there are banks that are open to be pioneers. But it's a challenge. It takes time, it takes patience, and having lessons from experts is key. So that's what we try to do. But I would choose, I'm not saying it's PPI, but please try to choose in each region the pioneer banks and not the followers.
Thank you. So we have time to two more questions. We already have one and the second, so.
Hello, I'm Zola from Island Movement, Croatia. So I have two questions. One is from Jean-Gabriel. You mentioned that you offer your investors a possibility to invest in SPV. Do they become owners of this SPV, and do they have any kind of decision-making opportunity, or you are managing everything and they just receive the dividends or whatever?
Yeah, most of the time they become shareholder, but we arrange the shareholder pact agreement so that they are not the one that decides. Yeah. We keep control, and they receive dividends.
Okay. And another question is for Anton. You mentioned that you gave the opportunity to your employees to have equity in your, let's say, projects, so to say, to have a skin in the game. How did they react? Was this a positive thing? Did you have to convince them to join in, or they don't want to take the risks?
Well, it didn't cost them anything, except for our first employee. Our first employee was a 27-year-old brilliant lawyer in Braga. And we were interviewing guys to do a bunch of legal work for us as we got the company ready. And he quoted me an hourly rate. He had a full-time day job in Porto doing something else. He quoted me an hourly rate of 120 euros. And I said, okay, Tiago, of that 120 euros, I'd like to offer you the potential to purchase equity. So we'll pay you in cash, of course, and some portion in equity. Of that range, would you please think about what you'd like as a blend of equity and cash? And I thought he'd come back and say, like, I want 100 euros per hour in cash and 20 euros in equity, based on some price. He came back and he said, I'll take 100 euros per hour in equity and 20 euros in cash. This guy is now quite young. He's still less than 30. And he may actually make some money on this. And we have 5 shareholders at our company, actual shareholders. He's one of them. And it's been so good. In every other case, we grant stock options to our people. We don't want a bunch of shareholders having to sign things and vote on, general, things at this point. We don't need the burden of a bunch of shareholders, but everyone will be rewarded with some equity at a nominal basis, like 1 penny per share, 1 cent per share. They don't object, but it seems, I think, to most of them kind of abstract as well.
Thank you for your answer. And last question.
Hello, my name is Andreas. I'm coming from Castellorizo. I believe that sometimes size matters, sometimes not. My question is why someone wants to invest in an island like Vento Tene, like Castellorizo, like Silba, like a small island in Denmark, in Scotland, and because I believe that the answer is negative, if you have any idea how, if there is something else, if there is a mechanism or something that can support these cases, these smaller communities, which are a part of the project, but they cannot talk and discuss with the banks and big investors or something else. If there is any idea about the smaller islands.
So it's what I presented at the beginning, the marketplace. It was set up inside the secretariat and the project to support this kind of a smaller project, which they have maybe not the knowledge to go to talk to a bank or to look for financing or even how to make a business case. So you can, and I can show you on the webpage, you have a link, you have my email and email of colleagues to ask for support for this. So we are here to help. We have resources inside the project to really support you, because we know it's not easy for smaller island. You're like kind of alone and you have so many hats on your head. So yeah, the idea under the secretariat is to help you to define and to define any parameters and analyze some risks that were mentioned to make sure that you arrive with a good speech, and then we can even help you to talk to the bank or find any investors.
Thank you.
So my first task in this session will be to end up at time, and I think that I managed that task also. Thank you. Now I would like to give the floor to Martina to explain how the next sessions will happen, and I would just like to thank you all for your great contributions. And we are at a coffee break, so if you have any questions that we did not answer, or for some reason, you can come to us. Thank you.
And thanks, George, for taking this not so nice role. Thank you so much.
I'll use this one. Yes, thanks again, both Amandine, George, and Leandro, who's somewhere sitting there, over there, for organizing this super interesting panel. So I would definitely encourage you to disturb their coffee break and ask as many questions as you want, because I'm sure that there's more hiding inside the crowd. But now, before we go into the coffee break, which, as you see, today is a little earlier and also on time, so thank you, George, for that. I just wanted to let you know about the 2 other breakout sessions organized for today. So we will have one breakout session on infrastructures and grids, which is going to take place in this room, and it's going to be led by our colleagues from Daphne, Kostas and Petros, by Eileen from the Stockholm Environment Institute, and by Moshtaba from Tinky. So if you're interested in this topic, and I think you are, you can stay in this room after the coffee break. Otherwise, you can join Amandine from Econoler, Camille from ESIN, and Maya and Ivan from Island Movement in the other room, where we're going to talk about energy efficiency, especially energy efficiency in existing buildings. And the format you will see will be quite similar to the one that we had yesterday. So there's going to be a little introduction, then some presentation of case studies, mostly from our 30 for 2030 islands and studies that we have developed within the secretariat, which in most cases are available on the website. And just so everyone is aware, these reports that we have published on the website are not on the island page yet. They're under resources in the website. I just say this because Tiago yesterday asked me about the Madeira study. So there's a lot of information. It's all there. We can perhaps later show you how to navigate the website a little better, but we are in the phase of updating also the information linked to each island. But releases take time, unfortunately, I'm told by our IT team. In any case, so infrastructures and grid here, energy efficiency there. And yeah, I mean, we look forward to other interesting discussions, and we look forward to also in the afternoon hearing from our rapporteurs, which will have the responsibility of sharing with everyone else what has been discussed in each breakout session. And with this, I don't steal any more of your time, and I send you to the coffee break. Thank you very much.